The sky above Karelia was no longer blue. Thick black smoke rose from every city. Fires burned across the forests, and the air smelled like metal and ash. In the capital city of Na Karil, buildings that once stood tall and bright now lay in ruins. The ground shook from distant explosions. The people hid underground, silent and afraid. The Karelians were a peaceful race. Tall, thin, with soft green skin and large glowing eyes, they had no army, no real weapons. They lived simple lives, full of music, art, and farming. War was not in their history, but peace had ended. The attackers were the Zarketh Dominion, a brutal alien empire known across the galaxy. The Zarketh were armored monsters with claws like knives and ships as big as mountains. No one ever stopped them. No one dared. They came to Karelia without warning. Their message was simple: surrender, or be destroyed. The Karelians had nothing to surrender. No armies, no riches, only their home. But the Zarketh didn't care. They wanted the land, the minerals, the space. And they wanted the Karelians gone. In 1 week, half the planet was burning. Inside a small underground room beneath the capital, a group of scientists worked around a blinking console. One of them, an old Karelian named Ilarin, tapped the controls. With shaking hands, "We must try again," he said. "Someone has to hear us." "But who?" asked Tavayan, a young engineer beside him. "No one answers. No one dares to fight the Zarketh. We are alone." Ilarin stared at the screen. "There is one race, new to the stars, fierce, unpredictable. Some call them dangerous, but maybe, just maybe, they will listen." "You mean humans?" Tavayan asked. Ilarin nodded. "Yes, the ones from Earth." Tavayan looked doubtful. "But humans have only been in space for 50 years. They have no great empire, no history in galactic wars." Ilarin smiled sadly. "Maybe that is why they are our only hope. They are not like the others. They do not follow the old rules." The signal was ready. A simple message, in the universal code, translated into dozens of languages. It said, "This is a call for help. We are under attack by the Zarketh Dominion. We have no weapons, no ships, no soldiers. We only ask for mercy. Please, help us." Ilarin pressed the button. The message launched into the stars, and then they waited. Far away, light years from Karelia, the signal reached a listening post on the edge of Terran space, the region controlled by humanity. The outpost was small, run by artificial intelligence and a handful of engineers. The AI flagged the signal and sent it straight to EarthGov Command. Within minutes, it reached the desk of Admiral Rylan Voss, commander of the 10th Terran Fleet. He was a tall man with gray in his hair and fire in his eyes, a soldier, a strategist, and most of all, someone who believed in doing the right thing, no matter the cost. He read the message. He looked at the map, and then he made a call. "Send. Word to Fleet Command," he said. "We're moving out." The officer beside him blinked. "Sir? All of us?" Voss didn't even look up. "Yes, all of us." Back on Karelia, days passed. Then a week. Tavayan had given up hope. Ilarin had grown quiet. Food was running low. Zarketh warships filled the sky, and escape seemed impossible then. Night, while hiding in a half-buried shelter, Tavayan looked up through a crack in the roof. The stars above were dim through the smoke, but something had changed. The stars were moving. No, not stars. Ships, hundreds of them. They arrived in silence, flashing in from hyperspace like streaks of lightning. The sky was suddenly full of massive metal beasts, sleek, black, and deadly. They formed a perfect wall above the planet. The Zarketh noticed. Alarms screamed across their networks. Their ships scrambled to respond, but they were too slow. The newcomers moved fast, like a well-oiled machine. Energy shields snapped on. Fighters launched. Battle formations shifted, and then the message came, broadcast on every frequency, in Corellian, in Zarketh, and in the clear, calm voice of a human AI. "This is the 10th Terran Fleet. Stand down, cease fire, or be eliminated." The Zarketh answered with missiles. The humans answered with fire. The battle was fast, brutal, and beautiful. Corellians watched, from broken rooftops and hidden caves. For the first time, they saw the Zarketh lose. Human ships danced between enemy fire, returning blasts with perfect aim. Massive railguns fired from orbit, tearing Zarketh carriers in half. Terran drones swarmed across the battlefield, disabling turrets, jamming signals, and clearing paths for troops. The Zarketh tried to retreat, but the humans didn't let them. Every move had been planned, every counterattack expected. The humans had studied the enemy, and they had come prepared. Within hours, the sky was clear. And then, the drop pods came. Dozens of them raining from orbit, glowing with energy. When they hit the ground, they opened like flowers, and out stepped Terran soldiers. Clad in armor, faces hidden behind visors, they moved with speed and purpose. But they didn't attack the Corellians. They offered water, medicine, food, and they spoke calmly. "We're here to help." Tavain stood in the ruins of his city, staring at a human soldier. She was short, strong, and kind-eyed. Her name was Captain Elena Park, and she offered him a small ration bar. "You okay?" she asked. Tavain could barely speak. You came." Park smiled. "Of course we did. But why?" he whispered. "We are no one. We are nothing." Park looked around at the ruins, the smoke, the fallen buildings, and then at the survivors who peeked out from behind rubble. "You're not nothing," she said. "You asked for help. That makes you worth saving." Tavain looked up at the human ships floating like giants above them. "We thought you'd send a ship. Maybe supplies, maybe a message." Elena Park gave a small grin. "Yeah, we get that a lot." He blinked. "But you sent all of this?" She shrugged. "You asked for help. We don't do anything halfway." And with that, she walked into the ruins, calling out for injured civilians, her team following close behind. High above on the bridge of the Unity's edge, Admiral Voss watched the planet's surface from orbit. A young officer turned to him. "Sir, the Corellians are safe. Zarketh retreat confirmed. What are your orders?" Voss didn't hesitate. "We hold position. Rebuild their defenses. Treat the wounded. And if the Zarketh come back," he leaned forward, "we remind them why they should have stayed away." For the first time in their history, the Corellians had hope, and across the stars, other civilizations heard the news. A helpless planet asked for help, and humanity sent an entire fleet. The galaxy would never forget it, and the war was just beginning. The fires were still burning on Corellia, but for the first time in weeks, the people could walk outside without fear. Corellians stood on shattered streets, looking at the sky with wide eyes. Above them, human ships hovered like silent guardians. Cleanup drones buzzed through the air. Supply crates dropped gently from orbit, landing with soft thuds. Medical shelters were being built in the ruins. The humans worked fast. Tavain walked beside Captain Elena Park, looking around in amazement. The human soldiers were everywhere, repairing broken roads, scanning for survivors, removing Zarketh tech. Some even laughed and sang while they worked. He couldn't understand it. "You lost soldiers during the battle," Tavain said. "You risked your lives for people you didn't know." Park nodded, her armor scratched but her eyes steady. "We didn't come for reward. We came because it was right." "But most races ignore distress signals," he said quietly. "They fear the Zarketh." Park stopped walking and turned to him. "We're not most races. In the command tent near the city center, human officers gathered around a holographic map. Admiral Rylan Voss stood at the center, arms crossed. Kirelia is stable, one officer said. Enemy forces in this region have been destroyed. But we're picking up signals. The Zarketh are regrouping. Voss looked at the red markers blinking on the map. They're preparing for a counterattack. Yes, sir. We estimate a new wave in 6 days. Maybe less. The Admiral tapped the table. Then we fortify. Shield grids, defense turrets. Civilian evacuations. I want our fleet in low orbit and a no-fly zone over all key cities. What about backup from EarthGov? Someone asked. Voss shook his head. We don't wait. We're the backup. Meanwhile, inside a ruined library, Corellian children huddled near heaters while human medics gave out food and blankets. A young Corellian girl stared up at a large Terran soldier with wide eyes. Are you a robot? She asked. The soldier chuckled and knelt down. No, just wearing armor. Your voice is scary, she said. He smiled behind the visor. That's on purpose. Scary for enemies, not for you. She giggled and offered him a piece of fruit. He accepted it with care. Tevine watched this from the doorway. The humans didn't act like conquerors. They helped. They listened. They shared. And they stayed. 3 days later, human engineers completed the Kirelia defense grid. Powered by solar arrays and backed by orbital satellites, it created a protective dome over key areas. Shield towers hummed as they activated, creating a faint blue shimmer above the cities. Tevine, being an engineer himself, had been asked to assist. At first, he was unsure. What could he offer to a species that had ships faster than light and weapons that burned through stone? But the humans treated him as an equal. You built the old comms network? One tech officer asked. Then you're on the team. Together, they linked human tech with Corellian systems. Tevine learned fast, and the humans learned too, about the planet, the culture, the people. It was not just defense, it was partnership. That night, under the soft glow of shield lights, a group of Corellians and humans sat around a fire outside the city. Captain Elena Park shared a metal container of warm stew with Tevine. You're different from what the galaxy says, he told her. What does the galaxy say? She asked. That humans are dangerous, loud, angry. Park laughed. Some of us are, but we've had wars too, bad ones. We know what it's like to be afraid, to be helpless. Tevine nodded slowly. You fight because you remember. She looked at the stars. We fight because we don't want anyone else to go through what we did. Silence passed between them. A silence of understanding. Then Park's communicator buzzed. She stood up quickly. Command to all units. Zarketh ships approaching. Prepare for contact. Within hours, the Terran fleet was in motion. Dozens of ships repositioned in orbit. Fighters launched into patrol formation. On the ground, soldiers locked down cities and activated shield towers. In the command center, Admiral Voss stared at the updated map. Zarketh reinforcements were coming. This time. They brought a dread carrier, a massive warship capable of launching hundreds of drones and missiles. Its dark hull glowed with red energy. Behind it, smaller cruisers followed. The message from the Zarketh was clear. Leave Kirelia, or die. With them. Voss didn't answer. Instead, he activated the Terran fleet channel. All ships. This is Admiral Voss. This is not just about one planet anymore. The Zarketh think they can silence cries for help with fire and death. Today we show them otherwise. Hold the line. No retreat. The second battle for Kirelia began. The dread carrier opened fire first, sending a wave of plasma missiles toward the planet. But this time, they hit a wall. The Terran defense grid lit up, blocking the blasts with shimmering blue light. Human ships returned fire. Massive cannons glowed as they launched projectiles through space. Fighters weaved between enemy ships, disabling engines and weapons with precise strikes. A new class of drone, Storm Shadows, activated, stealth units that slipped past shields and planted explosives deep inside enemy hulls. Above the chaos, Unity's Edge moved like a predator. Admiral Voss gave orders calmly, directing waves of attacks with perfect timing. On the ground, anti-air defenses roared to life. Human and Corellian engineers operated control stations side by side. The people who once hid in fear now stood tall, guiding the weapons that protected their home. Tavane manned one of the towers, barking commands into a headset. "Adjust targeting! Sector 7! Lock and fire!" Captain Park led a team into the jungle to locate and destroy a Zarketh beacon. It was a trap. Drones swarmed them, but she didn't back down. With quick thinking and a portable shield, she saved her team and finished the mission herself. After hours of battle, the tide turned. The dread carrier, damaged and leaking fire, tried to flee. But it was too slow. Unity's Edge unleashed its main cannon, a weapon never used before in battle. The blast tore through the carrier like paper. In one strike, the heart of the enemy fleet was gone, the rest scattered, and just like that, it was over. Cheers erupted across Corellia. In every city, survivors came out of hiding. Human soldiers raised the Terran banner beside the Corellian flag, not as rulers, but as protectors. Later, at a quiet ceremony in the capital, the Corellian Council met with Admiral Voss and his officers. Elder Ilarin, who had first sent the distress signal, stood at the podium. When we called for help, we expected silence, or pity, maybe a supply ship. He turned toward the humans. But you sent warriors, builders, friends. You sent all of you. Applause rang out. Admiral Voss stepped forward. "We didn't come for thanks," he said. "We came because no one else did. And we're not leaving you behind." That night, a new message was sent across the stars. From Corellia. A message of hope, a message that said, "We are not alone. Humanity has arrived, and they fight not just for themselves, but for all of us." Across the galaxy, oppressed worlds heard it, and began to believe. Corellia was no longer a forgotten world. Its name was now spoken in every corner of the galaxy. The planet that cried for help and was saved by humans. The world where the Zarketh Dominion lost, twice. But the war was not over. Far beyond. The stars, in the dark halls of the Zarketh throne world, a high council gathered in silence. Red lights flickered on their jagged armor. A massive screen showed the destruction of their dread carrier, their pride, their weapon of fear, now gone. The High Executor growled, "These humans must be crushed." Another Zarketh commander nodded. "We will burn their worlds, their colonies. We will make them regret ever lifting a weapon." A new order was given. Send a full battle group to the Valoran Expanse and prepare for Earth. Back on Corellia, the days passed with a strange mix of peace and tension. Human engineers continued building defenses. Corellian cities began to rise again. Cleaner, stronger. Medical camps turned into proper hospitals. Children played in the streets again. But in the skies, the Terran fleet remained. Every day, new ships arrived. From Earth, from nearby colonies, even from allied species who had once feared the Zarketh. Humanity's victory was changing the galaxy. Now, others wanted to join them. In a small war room beneath Corellia's capital, Admiral Voss, Captain Elena Park, and Tavane studied new reports. Tavane pointed at a map. "This is an old Zarketh forward base, abandoned for years, but now it's active again." Elena leaned forward. "They're preparing for something big." Voss nodded. "They're not just angry. They're afraid. That makes them dangerous." He looked at Tavane. "Can you help us read their new patterns?" "I'll try," Tavane said, but I'll need access to your fleet's sensors. You've got it, Voss said without hesitation. Tevane blinked. You trust me? That easily? The Admiral gave a small smile. You're one of us now. That night, while others slept, Tevane sat in the dark inside the Unity's edge, scanning data. The more he read, the more worried he became. The Zarketh weren't. Just preparing to attack Corellia again. They were planning a full retaliation, a campaign to destroy every colony, every station, and every ship that supported the humans, and worst of all, they were sending a fleet toward Earth. The next morning, Voss called a meeting of the full Terran Command Council. Voices buzzed through. Holograms from other star systems. We have to protect Earth, one general said. If the Zarketh reach Sol, everything we've built could fall. But if we leave Corellia undefended, another voice warned. Voss raised a hand. No, we hold both. Silence. We split the fleet. Half stays here, half jumps to Earth. We don't abandon those who stood with us. Not ever. Some protested. But Voss's voice was final. We win by standing together, not by running. Soon after, the second Terran fleet left Corellia, heading straight for Earth. The rest, including Unity's Edge, stayed behind. They had 6 days before the next Zarketh wave would arrive. 6 days to prepare. Elena Park was leading patrols through the outer jungles when her scout drones picked up something strange. A small Zarketh dropship, crashed, half buried in mud. No signals. No life signs. She approached with a small team. Inside, they found a wounded Zarketh warrior, unconscious but breathing. His armor was cracked. His weapon gone. They took him to a secure medical bay. Tevane joined the team to study him. He's not a soldier, Tevane said after scanning the alien. Look at his implants. He's a technician. Maybe a comms officer. Elena looked closer. He might have data, plans, orders. The humans didn't torture. They didn't harm. Instead, they gave the Zarketh food, water, and medical care. At first, he resisted. But when he saw Tevane, another alien treated with respect by humans, he began to speak. And what he said changed everything. They're coming with a weapon, the Zarketh prisoner said. Something ancient. Something from before our time. Tevane leaned forward. What kind of weapon? A black core. A gravity spike. It can tear open a planet's crust. Elena's eyes widened. They plan to destroy Corellia completely. The Zarketh prisoner looked away. Yes, they want to make an example. Word spread quickly through the human ranks. Fear flickered in the eyes of many soldiers, not because they were afraid to fight, but because they knew the cost. Corellia might not survive the next attack. But the Corellians were not the same people who had hidden in fear. Now they stood beside the humans. They built bunkers, trained with weapons, helped program drones and defense grids. One group even formed their own local militia, calling themselves the Green Flame. We will not run, said Elder Alarin. Not again. Admiral Voss gathered his officers. We cannot let them deploy. This gravity spike, he said. If it activates, this planet will die. Then we stop them in orbit, Elena said. Tevane stepped forward with a plan. There's a way. If we can launch a small team into the main enemy ship, we could destroy the weapon before it drops. Voss raised an eyebrow. A stealth mission? Yes, Tevane said. I'll go with them. I helped decode the Zarketh systems. I know where the core is stored. Elena spoke at once. I'm going too. Voss nodded slowly. Pick your best. You leave as soon as they arrive. The night before the attack, the skies were quiet. Soldiers cleaned their gear. Engineers checked power lines. Drones flew silent circles in the clouds. Tevane stood on a rooftop, staring at the stars. Elena joined him. Are you ready? She asked. No, he said honestly. But I'll go anyway, she smiled. That's courage. They stood in silence for a moment. Then alarms began to ring. The Zarketh had arrived. The sky lit up like fire. Red energy beams cut through the clouds. Giant warships dropped from hyperspace, their hulls glowing with dark power. The biggest one, the Maw of Korthal, carried the gravity spike. Unity's Edge moved into action, leading the defense. Missiles launched. Shields flared. Fighters danced like sparks across the sky. And in the middle of it all, a small stealth shuttle launched from the shadows. Inside were 6 figures, Captain Park, Tevayan, and 4 Terran special operatives. Their mission, board the Maw of Korthal and destroy the gravity spike. They flew through the chaos, using debris and signal jammers to avoid detection. Once they reached the enemy ship, they latched onto a weak point in the hull and began cutting through. Inside, the corridors were dark and wet. Zarketh tech was cold and sharp. Every corner seemed alive. They moved fast, silent, focused. Tevayan led them through twisted halls. He used the prisoners' data and his own knowledge to find the central chamber. At last, they reached it. The gravity spike core stood in the center, a black sphere surrounded by pulsing red lights. Elena stepped forward. "Plant charges. We don't have long." Suddenly, alarms screamed. Zarketh guards poured into the chamber. Blasters fired. Explosions rocked the room. The humans held their ground, defending Tevayan as he activated the detonator. He turned, face calm. "It's set." "Then run!" Elena shouted. They raced back through the ship, chased by enemy drones. 2 operatives were wounded. 1 stayed. Behind, to hold the door, the rest made it back to the shuttle. As they launched away, the charges exploded. The Maw of Korthal split in 2. The gravity spike was destroyed. On the ground, the rest of the Zarketh fleet began to fall apart. With their main ship gone, their coordination collapsed. Terran ships pushed forward. One by one, the invaders were destroyed or forced to flee. When the last enemy signal vanished, a wave of silence spread across the battlefield. Corellia was safe. Again. In the days that followed, humans and Corellians rebuilt side by side. Monuments were placed at battle sites. Names of the fallen, both human and Corellian, were written in stone. Admiral Voss stood at the main square, speaking to both species. "They wanted to break us," he said, "but instead they brought us together. They reminded us that courage lives in every world, in every heart, human or not. And from that day forward, the people of Corellia no longer saw the Terran fleet as just soldiers. They saw them as family." Corellia was no longer just a planet. It had become a symbol. Across the galaxy, species that had once lived in fear were now watching, learning, and whispering. They had all seen the messages. They had all heard the stories. The humans came. They fought the Zarketh. And they won. On planets ruled by tyrants, slaves began to hope. In hidden colonies, old resistance leaders began to speak again. In cold, quiet corners of space, alien captains looked up at the stars and asked a question they had never dared to ask before. Could we fight too? Inside the main Terran outpost on Corellia, the command room buzzed with new signals. Dozens of encrypted messages arrived every hour, not from Earth, but from distant, desperate voices. One came from the Urashi nomads, a species living in asteroid belts. Another from the Tharn Collective, long believed extinct. Even small rebel groups within Zarketh-controlled space began transmitting coordinates, codes, and requests. Captain Elena Park read the latest report and looked up. "They're asking for help," she said. Tevayan stood beside her. "They believe you'll come." Elena smiled, tired but proud. "They're right." Admiral Rylan Voss stood at the center of the planning chamber, surrounded by officers, diplomats, and now alien envoys. Corellia's elder Ilarin had called a special council meeting. It was the first time so many species had gathered together. In one place under no flag, no empire, no threat, just hope. The map on the screen showed Zarketh-controlled space in red. Small blue lights blinked across it. Rebel hideouts, resistance cells, secret colonies ready to rise. Voss pointed at the A screen. We don't just defend anymore. We take the fight to them. The room went quiet. Then Elder Alarin spoke. This is what the Zarketh fear. Unity. Not ships, not weapons, but people standing together. A ripple of nods moved through the room. The decision was made. Operation Starfall was born. It would be the first galaxy-wide multi-species strike against the Zarketh Dominion, a coordinated attack on 5 of their major outposts, not to conquer but to free enslaved worlds and break their grip. The heart of the operation was an ancient Zarketh command center near a collapsed black hole called Naxir's Maw. It was believed to be indestructible, protected by gravity storms, minefields, and cloaking shields. That's where we'll strike last, Voss said. We break their arm first, then we take out the brain. Tevane volunteered to lead a special tech team for the mission. He had been working closely with Terran engineers and had even helped upgrade Corellian drones using human energy cells. The humans trusted him, and he had found new purpose. Elena Park was promoted to lead the unified ground forces, made up of Terran soldiers, Corellian fighters, and new volunteers from across the stars, including lizard-like warriors from Jornak, silent stealth troopers from Elros, and even defected Zarketh who had turned against their masters. Humanity had lit a fire, and it was spreading. As the new alliance prepared, a message was sent from EarthGov to every species on the common network. It was translated into 3,000 languages and broadcast through every major relay. The message came from Earth's president, Lena Moraes, a woman known for peace, but not afraid of war. Her speech was simple. For too long we've looked away. For too long the strong have crushed the weak. That ends now. We are not conquerors. We are not rulers. But we will no longer stand by. If you suffer, we are coming. If you fight, we stand beside you. And if you threaten the innocent, you will answer to humanity. And not just humanity, all of us. The galaxy exploded with reaction. Some praised the humans. Others feared them. The Zarketh raged. Their leaders gathered again in secret. The High Executor slammed his clawed fist onto the table. They unite the stars! We must stop them before the galaxy burns with rebellion! A terrible plan was formed. One last weapon, hidden for centuries, a device known as the Woundmaker. An ancient satellite that could infect star systems with black radiation, turning living worlds into dead zones. They prepared to deploy it above Naxir's Maw. Their goal, destroy any fleet that dared attack. Back on Corellia, final preparations for Operation Starfall were underway. Dozens of ships, Terran and alien, hovered above the planet, forming a growing fleet. Human engineers shared technology freely. The once fragmented groups worked together, sharing language tools, tactics, and plans. In a quiet moment before departure, Elena Park stood with Tevane on a viewing deck. You ever think we'd get here? She asked. Tevane smiled. No, I didn't even think we'd survive. Me either, she said. But now look at us. He nodded toward the stars. We gave them something they forgot. Hope. The fleet launched. It moved like a storm, waves of ships jumping into hyperspace, then reappearing near enemy targets. One by one, the 5 Zarketh outposts were hit. Fighters screamed through enemy skies. Resistance fighters were dropped onto planets to rally the locals. Orbital bombardments cleared Zarketh turrets, and troops planted flags not of ownership, but of freedom. In every battle, humans fought side by side with aliens. They shared food, saved each other, bled together. Each victory sent a shockwave through the galaxy. The Zarketh lines cracked, and the final target remained, Naxir's maw. The approach to the maw was the most dangerous yet. The black hole nearby bent space and light. Time moved strangely. The Zarketh defenses were brutal. Cloaked mines, invisible turrets, and distortion fields. But the Alliance fleet had prepared. Terran AI pilots ran the course simulations. Elros cloakers scouted the path. Jornak warriors mapped enemy patrols. When the assault began, it was the biggest fleet battle in recorded history. Thousands of ships, hundreds of species. One goal. The maw itself was massive, a space station built into an asteroid, spinning slowly above the black hole. Zarketh guns lined its surface. The Woundmaker satellite hovered nearby, charging. Unity's Edge led the charge. Admiral Voss's voice came through all comms. This is for every world they've crushed. This is for every child who hid underground. This is for every voice that cried for help and finally got an answer. The battle was chaos. Ships exploded. Troops boarded the maw station. Tavine, now leading a cyber squad, infiltrated the data core. With his help, they hacked into the Woundmaker's control and discovered the Zarketh's plan to unleash it on the entire Alliance. If they activate this, he said, millions will die. Elena Park and her team launched a daring assault. On the satellite, they boarded it through a tiny maintenance hatch, fought through traps and auto turrets, and reached the core. Park planted explosives. Ready? She asked. Tavane's voice came through her comms. Do it! She hit the trigger. From the fleet, a huge light exploded as the Woundmaker was destroyed. Cheers rose. The final weapon was gone. With the station exposed and the fleet broken, the Zarketh command collapsed. Some tried to flee, others surrendered. For the first time in their brutal history, the Zarketh dominion was no longer feared. It was falling. The Alliance fleet returned to Corellia, not as conquerors, but as liberators. Celebrations were held across many worlds. New alliances formed, trade opened, cultures shared, and at the center of it all, humanity stood quietly. They did not build a capital. They did not claim planets. They simply stood beside their new friends, ready to defend peace. Tavayan spoke at the first Unified Free World Summit, held on Corellia. I was there when the message was sent, he said. We had no hope, no power, and yet the humans came, not just with weapons, but with hearts open, with hands ready. They showed us we were not alone. Elena stood beside him and added, we are stronger together. This is just the beginning. And the crowd, full of humans, aliens, and former enemies, stood as one. The stars were peaceful again. For the first time in decades, the Zarketh Dominion no longer controlled the galaxy's edge. Their fleets were gone. Their strongholds were dust. Their fear broken. The fall of Naxir's maw had spread through space like a wave. The mighty Zarketh were defeated. Their darkest weapon, the Woundmaker, was destroyed. Worlds once silenced by fear now sang with freedom. On the planet Corellia, where it had all begun, a quiet sunrise painted the sky gold. Captain Elena Park stood on a balcony, looking down at the growing city below. Streets were busy. Corellians and humans worked side by side, planting crops, rebuilding schools, laughing and living. She smiled. From behind her, Tavane walked up, carrying 2 cups of hot leaf brew, a Corellian drink humans had come to. Enjoy. Still not sleeping? He asked, handing her a cup. Elena took it. Not much. Every time I close my eyes, I think of what we almost lost. Tavayan nodded. But we didn't. No, she agreed. Because we stood together. In orbit, the great human warship Unity's Edge floated peacefully. Its hull was scarred from battle, but its spirit was strong. Admiral Ryland Voss sat in his ready room, reading the latest report. Zarketh surrender confirmed. Remaining commanders detained. Former slave worlds liberated. Resistance leaders. Request assistance forming new governments. He leaned back, thoughtful. There was still much work to do. The galaxy was healing, but not yet healed. He tapped a message into his comm panel. To EarthGov. Mission success. Zarketh Dominion has fallen. Awaiting instructions for next deployment. Recommend formation of permanent peacekeeping force. Then, he added almost as an afterthought, also, the people of Corellia request the Terran anthem for their Founding Day celebration. Please send music files. He smiled. Later that day, the Unified Free Worlds Council held its first full session. 32 species represented in one chamber, including Earth. The council chamber had no thrones. No central seat of power, just circles of equal height, arranged, like petals around a shared table. Elder Ellerin opened the session. He stood slowly, age showing on his face, but his voice strong. This council was born from pain, he said, from war, but also from courage. He looked at the human delegation. We asked for help, and they answered not with promises, but with action. He paused. They did not come to rule. They came to stand beside us. And that is why this future we build is a future worth believing in. Applause rose, loud and genuine. But even in victory, there were wounds. More than 200 Terran soldiers had died in the final assault, so had thousands of resistance fighters and civilians. One day after the council session, Ayadi Joint Memorial was held on Corellia. Soldiers of many species stood in silent rows. Black banners waved in the wind. Names scrolled slowly across a giant display, in Terran script, Corellian glyphs, and others. Elena Park stood in front of the crowd. She didn't give a long speech. She just said, "They were brave, they stood for others, and we will never forget them." Then she stepped aside, and a young Corellian girl, the same one who once asked a soldier if he was a robot, walked up and placed a flower on the memorial wall. While the galaxy mourned, it also rebuilt. New trade routes were opened between free worlds. War orphans were adopted by families of all species. Knowledge, technology, and culture flowed across borders once closed. Earth became known not as a conqueror, but as a rallying star, a planet that had answered a cry for help, not with one ship, but with an entire fleet. And it didn't stop there. 3 months later, the Terran Exploration and Peace Fleet was formed, not as an empire builder, but as a protector. Their motto was simple: we show up. The fleet carried doctors, engineers, peacekeepers, and yes, soldiers if needed, not to invade, but to protect. Every ship flew not just the Terran flag, but the banner of the Unified Free Worlds, a symbol of cooperation. Admiral Voss was named commander of the entire Peace Fleet. He accepted with one condition: no borders between us. Only bridges. As peace returned, so did small joys. Elena Park took a break from military duty. She stayed on Corellia for a while, helping train local defense teams and build schools. Tavayen began leading a Corellian science team to explore ancient ruins buried beneath their own planet. With human tech and Corellian knowledge, they uncovered artifacts long forgotten. He sent one of them, a glowing crystal shaped like a star, as a gift to Earth's museum. But not all was calm. In a distant part of space, a new signal was picked up, a weak distress call from a mining moon on the edge of the Red Drift Nebula. Pirates, unknown, violent, no government nearby to help. For a moment, EarthGov hesitated, but only for a moment. A week later, 6 ships from the Peace Fleet appeared above the mining moon. The pirates tried to flee. They didn't get far. The moon's people were saved. They asked, "Who sent you?" The lead officer said, "You asked for help." They asked, "How many of you are there?" He smiled. as many as needed. Back on Corellia during founding. Day celebrations. Tevayan gave a speech in front of a crowd of thousands, humans, Corellians, and others. He said, "We thought no one would hear us. We were wrong. We thought help meant a supply ship, but they sent an entire fleet, and what they gave us was not just freedom, but family." At the end, a choir of human and Corellian children sang together in both languages. The song was called "We Showed Up." Up in orbit, as fireworks danced in the sky, Unity's Edge prepared for its next jump. Admiral Voss stood on the bridge, looking at the planet below. A young officer turned to him. "Sir, next destination?" He tapped the console. "Wherever. We're needed." The stars blinked, the engines lit, and once again, humanity moved forward.